But big breaking news coming in. UK Prime Minister Liz Truss has become the Prime Minister to serve the shortest stint in UK history. She's announced her resignation just a few minutes ago outside 10 Downing Street, and we'll play out that entire statement for you for a bit. It's been just a 45-day-old stint, a short and chaotic one which saw her first announce a number of mini-budget policies which threw markets into a tailspin. She had to walk back from that, has had a change in the Treasury Secretary as well as the Home Secretary, and now is stepping down herself. We're getting you more details on this breaking story, but I'm joined now by Craig Erleb for more on this. Craig, if you can hear me, was this widely expected that there was no way out of the kind of political mess Liz Truss had found herself, and what will be the response to her resignation just a few minutes ago?
It was always going to be extremely difficult because her credibility was in pieces. She was one of the architects of the mini-budget, which led to her sacking her Chancellor and close friend, and therefore there was no getting away from the fact that she was equally responsible. Her credibility was in bits. The markets didn't reflect her position or the government that she was leading, and it was at a time of economic hardship for the UK. The economy may already be in recession, inflation is above 10%, interest rates are rising aggressively. We need political leadership and stability in order to keep markets on board, and we didn't have that. And without that, it was always going to be harder to turn things around, both for the economy but also for her personal career. And it was clear that the best thing that she could do for the country was to resign and let someone who is more credible and who is more experienced and who is better positioned to take over and lead the country forward. And thankfully, she's decided to do so.
Going to be the kind of response you think from markets, European markets specifically? Craig, do you think this will be welcomed, or the political uncertainty will sort of leave a sense of, unsettling in the markets right now?
Well, the response in pound sterling has been positive so far. So that's one sign, although we're still talking relatively small moves. But you could see following the reports that the press conference was coming and the speculation started to circulate that we could be about to witness another resignation in a short period of time. The pound did move higher, so that is a sign that the markets view this more favourably. But there's still so many unanswered questions. Who's going to lead the party now? How much stability is that going to provide? Are we going to have a general election? What does this mean for the budget in 11 days' time? Can we possibly hold on, or does that now have to get put back as well? What does it mean for the economy, the big decisions? Over the summer, we had to wait 2 or 3 months for the big decisions to be made, and I think most people would agree that it held the country back. It stopped us putting in place a plan on energy prices, for example. This is the least worst option, but it's still a bad option for the country. So it seems that, yes, there's a slightly positive response because there's the potential for the future to look a bit brighter. But we should be in no doubt that this is an absolute shambles at this point in time. We've got an enormous political uncertainty and instability, and it's the country and the economy that pays the price.
Absolutely. Stay on with us, Craig. I also have Manish Singh of Crossbridge Capital with me right now on the phone line. Manish, great to have you on the show as we discuss this breaking story. And we've been talking about the turmoil in the UK and its impact for some time now. Was this along expected lines, and do you think that this is the best solution to bring some stability, really, to the UK economy and global markets?
Well, hi, Tamanna. It has looked inevitable for the last few days, as you know. So the fact that it has happened should not come as a surprise. To the point about its impact, I think just a slight move in GBP USD has nothing to do with what's happened now. It's not like market is welcoming Liz Truss has left. I disagree with that. The larger context you have to bear in mind that what a lot of people are not talking about is that this is a consequence of unfunded spending that not just UK but many countries have done over COVID. I mean, let's talk about it. This country, we spent £370 billion. It was not funded. We are spending over £100 billion in energy price cap. It's not funded. So the consequences of these unfunded spending are going to be felt everywhere. UK is just ahead of the curve because we seem to always be ahead in terms of discussions and wrangling and everything that happens around. So yes, it does add a bit of political instability because you need to know who the government is and what the policies are going to be. But by no means this is strange because across the world you have seen these things happening. And our discussions and our debates are much more open than happens on the continent. But there's no way that this is a strange phenomenon or it's happening only here. And you will see these things happen in other parts of the economy as well, or of the world as well.
Play out. Craig and Manish, I request you to stay on. I just want to play out exactly what Liz Truss said in that very short and brief statement that she made, just a short while ago when she announced her resignation. Let's just listen in.
I came into office at a time of great economic and international instability. Families and businesses were worried about how to pay their bills. Putin's illegal war in Ukraine threatens the security of our whole continent, and our country has been held back for too long by low economic growth. I was elected by the Conservative Party with a mandate to change this. We delivered on energy bills and on cutting national insurance. And we set out a vision for a low-tax, high-growth economy that would take advantage of the freedoms of Brexit. I recognise, though, given the situation, I cannot deliver the mandate on which I was elected by the Conservative Party. I have therefore spoken to His Majesty the King to notify him that I am resigning as leader of the Conservative Party. This morning I met the chairman of the 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady. We've agreed that there will be a leadership election to be completed within the next week. This will ensure that we remain on a path to deliver our fiscal plans and maintain our country's economic stability and national security. I will remain as Prime Minister until a successor has been chosen. Thank you.
So a brief and chaotic stint. She will remain, Liz Truss will remain Prime Minister till a successor is chosen. Who the successor will be is, of course, the next big question. But just to tell you what's been happening, UK bond yields at 3.875 at this point. The pound actually improving in health after this announcement. Manish Singh is of the view that this is not really the market responding to Liz Truss. But, we'll get into that in just a bit. I want to welcome Alistair Newton to this special coverage at this point as we discuss the Truss affair and what the lessons really are, what happens next. Alistair, was this an inevitable conclusion to all of the chaos that we've been witnessing in the UK over the last few weeks? And was there no other way? Had the matter become so serious that Liz Truss had no way to back out of it but to resign?
I think that probably is the case after the chaos we saw yesterday in particular. Up until yesterday afternoon, I think, you could look at it either way. There was a case for her staying on for quite a long time, maybe through the full 12 months normal period for new prime ministers before there can be a challenge. There was certainly a case, and actually, even though she's resigned, I think in many ways, there still is a theoretical case for her staying on until Jeremy Hunt has delivered his budget on the 31st of October. But what we saw in the House last night over the fracking vote, and perhaps particularly the resignation of Braverman, Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary and a right-wing favourite, to my mind, that looked very much like a move by Braverman to line herself up for a succession election. And I think from that moment on, and certainly from the moment that Graham Brady, the chair of the 1922 committee, went to Downing Street unscheduled, let it be said this morning, then the writing was clearly on the wall. There was no way in which Liz Truss was going to lead her party into the next election, despite her repeatedly saying she was going to. Frankly, you saw Sir Nigel Starmer give her a mauling in Prime Minister's Question Time yesterday. It was just going to continue like that right through until the election, as long as she was occupying 10 Downing Street.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the question is, What next? You're seeing Suella Braverman, and Alistair, this is a follow-up for you. You're seeing Suella Braverman and her resignation was sort of a setup maybe for her to present herself as the alternative. Are the old favourites back in the race? Should I talk about Rishi Sunak yet, or is it too early?
Well, it would surprise me enormously if Rishi Sunak's supporters were not to be moving on his behalf, even as you and I speak. Similarly, Suella Braverman, there may well be other hats in the ring. Penny Mordaunt has been flagged as somebody who may put her name forward. Jeremy Hunt, interestingly, has already said that he's not stand. And it'll be interesting to see what Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, who many regard as being a middle way, a potential compromise candidate and a competent minister as well. It will be interesting to see if he goes back on what he said a couple of days ago, now there is a vacancy, and actually puts his hat into the ring. But frankly, right now, I think it's anybody's guess who is going to be the next leader of the Conservative Party, and therefore the next Prime Minister, especially since but all the signs are that they're going to do this within a week, which suggests very strongly that they are only going to do one round among the Parliamentary Conservative Party and not go out to the wider constituency. Now, let's keep in mind that it was the wider constituency who put the right-wing Liz Truss into the job in the first place. She only got the support of something under 1/3 of her political party. That seems to suggest that Suella Braverman is really a bit of an outsider if she does stand, and we're likely to get somebody who is more to the centre of the party than she is.
Now, Manish, we were speaking earlier about, how markets are responding to all of this news, and you were taking a sort of a wider perspective, but surely all of this political turmoil will not help. Do you think at least we can look at the positives in way the pound is responding right now? Bond yields have, sort of settled a bit as well?
Well, I think that you will always have some reactions, because the key thing you have to bear in mind is the economic policy. So because Jeremy Hunt is not putting himself up for election, that will be seen as a positive. But I want just to follow up on what Alistair was saying. First thing is that it is a 1-week election period, absolutely. I am a member of the party and I would like to vote, just like I had last time. So what I hear is that there's going to be an online voting where the members will get a say, and members should get a say, because if they don't get a say and you bring another leader, then you will have a big problem down the line. The party membership have already rejected Sunak, so I don't see how he's going to win, no matter what people are saying. So anybody could be the leader, and that's an open question, absolutely. But as per from where I see, the members are getting a vote. It is likely going to be online from what I hear, and they should get a vote. And on that basis, I see the probability of Rishi Sunak winning very low. Of course, you never say never, because at least it's a matter of people voting. So it could be anyone, but you have to bear in mind that if it is not a democratic and membership doesn't get a vote, that's a big problem for the party going forward, and that could be ended very badly for the whole Tory party. And to the point about Jeremy Hunt staying as Chancellor, of course, he is for now. He's going to deliver his budget on 31st of October, as he has said. So largely on that policy, given that happened that most of the things said in many budgets have been reversed, and we're talking about high taxation and various things, that should provide stability, which is why you have seen 10-year yield come down to 3.8 level now, lower than where it is in the US at 4.2 level. So that seems to be the economic thing playing out.
I also want to welcome to our conversation Lord Meghnad Desai, economist and author. Lord Meghnad Desai, thank you so much for speaking with us today as big news breaks out. And I had the opportunity to speak with you earlier. I think you were one of the few people who said very clearly Liz Truss must go. She has resigned today. Do you think this is the first step towards fixing the situation?
Well, I was not in favor of either Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, but I thought that Liz Truss had more experience than Rishi, because he's only a fresher parliamentarian almost. No, I think basically she made a mistake of going too far too soon. with a policy. I had said in print in London that if she plans to do what she intends to do, the pound will collapse. And the pound has collapsed, and now I think we need a change. And I believe, like what your previous interlocutor was saying, I think the Conservative Party will decide to cut the cackle and just basically go for Jeremy Hunt, because right now they need time to restore the reputation. They need a mature politician. And Jeremy Hunt, who has been around, who has been a health secretary, who has had another cabinet position, and has twice tried to be leader and come second, I think he will be a very good pair of hands. And luckily, he's already shown that the markets are happy with him being at the top. So he will not continue to be the chancellor. Maybe Rishi will come back as a chancellor, and that's quite possible because they're friends. But I think what will happen is that Jeremy Hunt would most probably become the new prime minister. I think this whole episode has brought the country into great disgrace. Everybody's laughing, including inside the country. And I think the Conservative Party will have to try very hard to regain the reputation.
Right. So in terms of what happens next and how global markets will be looking at this, do you think just the act of resignation moves towards more stability, or the fact that there's going to be an important election within the party leadership next week still leaves that question mark, Lord Desai?
No, you see, we have a problem here, which people haven't realized. Legally, we cannot have an election till 2024. There is something called Fixed Term Parliament Act, which was passed during the coalition government 2010-2015, but the Liberal Democrats, who are partner in the coalition, insisted that election must be held every 5 years and not in between, because they were afraid that the Conservatives may ditch them halfway through the first coalition. So they passed that, and we have every desire to reverse that. But right now, that act stands. So even if they wanted to have an election, there's no way they can have an election right now. So the best thing to have another prime minister who will take the party to the election deadline, as it were. So right now, it is not open to the prime minister, whoever it is, to call an election. That freedom has been taken away constitutionally. The opposition can propose it, and if then the government agrees, that would be. But right now, Conservative Party doesn't want an election. They want a bit more time to restore their reputation, which has been shredded completely. Now, everybody's laughing at them. This was supposed to be a good Conservative Party, responsible for financial sort of orthodoxy and all that, and they made fools of themselves. So I think they will want to get over this little crisis and reassure the markets, maybe on Monday morning, maybe tomorrow morning, Jeremy Hunt will again make a statement that everything is all right and they will get a new prime minister very, very quickly.
Stay with me, Lord Desai. Alistair is also with us on the show. Alistair Newton is also with us on the show. Alistair, what do you make of Lord Meghnad Desai's point of view that Jeremy Hunt is very much in the race? And what would markets want to see now? Because the bulk of the problem was reversed, right? It was the mini budget which was the problem. Tax cuts without explaining where the money was coming in from. And there is now a new, Treasury Secretary and all of that. But do you think that's going to be enough? What would markets now need to see in terms of stability?
Well, first of all, let me thank Manish for putting me straight on the electronic vote, which I think is interesting. And thank you for that, Manish. I wouldn't rule out Jeremy Hunt becoming Prime Minister simply because he said he's not going to stand. He might well be arm twisted into the job. But I think, frankly, the investment community would far rather see him staying where he is right now. And I very much hope that nobody who is proposing to run for Prime Minister looks like they might look to replace him with somebody else, because that would actually be very bad news for markets. But let's take a scenario here, and I think probably what we'll call the least bad scenario, that Jeremy Hunt remains at the Treasury, which I personally, with all due respect to Lord Desai, I think is actually the best place for him from a market perspective, at least. From the party's perspective, well, I think we could debate that for a good deal longer. But we get somebody in the Prime Minister's office who at least is reasonably comparable to Hunt in the way that she or he looks upon the world and how to fix the problems. The problems are far from fixed. There is still a 40 billion fiscal hole in the UK's budget planning today. There is still a Conservative Party which will still have a majority in the House of Commons and which is deeply divided on economics, on social policy, on Europe, you name it, the party is deeply divided. The party is rebellious. We saw that again last night. And as we've seen in Conservative governments since pretty much 1989, rebellion becomes a habit. And you get backbenchers who are going to continue to rebel, especially ex-ministers who have no prospect of advancing their career further. And there are a lot of ex-ministers on the Tory backbenches today. The European Research Group is big enough to, if it voted en bloc against the government, to defeat the government. The Red Wall MPs are numerous enough to do the same. The challenges are far from over. The new Prime Minister is going to inherit what is, in my view, a poisoned chalice, both economically and politically, and have a real struggle to get legislation through Parliament, which is going to keep markets calm. And sooner or later, there is going to have to be legislation. Announcements alone will only take you so far.
The question of a fresh election and the point that was made earlier that there's going to be some time for it. Technically, it cannot happen. You will have to wait till 2024. Do you think that that will lead to an extended period of uncertainty? Alistair, that's a question for you.
Well, with all due respect to Lord Desai, I was under the impression that the fixed parliamentary term bill had actually been revoked by the Tories. I may be wrong about that, but one way or the other, it is possible to hold an early election. Even in the fixed term bill, there was a mechanism for doing this, much the same as we've seen in Germany, if you go back to 2005, when Schröder forced a vote of no confidence against his own party in order to hold an early election. But the key point here is actually the one that Lord Desai made. If we look at the opinion polls today, Labour has got an historic lead in opinion polls. And although we've all learned in the last few years to be cautious of opinion polls, frankly, 54-19 is a good deal more than statistical margin for error. And if there were an election in 3 or 4 weeks' time, if a new Prime Minister were to come in and call a snap election next month, the Tories would get carved up. There's no question about that whatsoever. So I just can't see there being an election in the near term. And I do think that, as is usually the case when a government is in trouble, they will likely run this parliamentary term for as long as they can, which takes us back to Lord Desai's prediction that this parliament will run until late 2024. I would agree with that, irrespective of fixed term Parliament Act or not.
Craig, for whoever takes over in the next 1 week, and that, of course, leads to now a fresh set of speculations. We'll have to see what happens in that Conservative Party leadership vote. What would be the focus there and the priority? Because like Alistair said, there is still a massive hole in the budget. All of Europe is dealing from high energy prices, high inflation, and those issues very much still persist.
Absolutely, and this is where we kind of go full circle. We're so focused on the politics, and rightfully so right now, given everything that's happened in the last 24 hours. But there is still a lot of questions to be answered on the budget and how they're going to pay for the energy bills, etc., and how we're going to get the economy back on track. This was just another scenario that we just didn't need right now. We've got an economy which could also already be in recession, inflation in double digits, interest rates rapidly rising, and this now political distraction is just the last thing we needed. But it was almost essential at that point because of how bad things had gone. The most important thing in the next 2 weeks is probably really what comes from the budget if we do see it, and how they plan to fill this hole and how to get the markets back on board. Because it's all well and good talking about this, that and the other, but if we see interest rates expectations rising as we were seeing over the course of the last 3 weeks, then this recession is going to be far worse than what is currently being anticipated. If interest rates are going to rise to 5-6%, things could get much worse, much faster, and that could have a terrible effect on the markets, regardless of which candidate ultimately replaces Liz Truss. At that point, we won't be talking about who's in charge. We're going to be talking about an economy in turmoil. In terms of things like elections and things like that, I agree with a number of your guests that it's not in the Tory party's interest right now simply to hold an election. Who in their right mind would hold an election now knowing that you have absolutely no chance of winning? It makes more sense to knuckle down, try and put a leader in charge who can regain the trust and credibility and stability in the economy, and hope that over the course of the next 2 years that you can put yourself in a much stronger position. And that's what the Conservative Party have to do now, because this has been a frankly horrific few months for them.
All right, who will be the successor now is the big question. Chris, do you want to come in with your view on this? Before Liz Truss came in, it seemed to be Liz Truss versus Rishi Sunak. Are the names of the contenders now changing? Is Jeremy Hunt, Braverman, Rishi Sunak all in the fray?
I mean, it's so difficult to say right now, because if this does go to the Conservative Party membership, then I agree that Rishi Sunak doesn't stand much of a chance. But you can imagine that within the Conservative Party MPs, that his credibility is now probably greater than it even was during the last election campaign, because during the debate when Liz Truss was talking about cutting taxes and all the promises that she made, he was right there on TV telling everyone what the ramifications was going to be. And effectively, what he said, what he warned about, is exactly what followed in the market. So his credibility at this point in time within the Conservative Party MPs in Parliament is going to be very strong. But it ultimately depends on how they want to do it, because as one of your other guests alluded to, a week doesn't sound like a lot of time, and that suggests that we may be seeing something put forward whereby we see two candidates being put towards the end in the similar manner that Theresa May was elected Prime Minister, and nothing goes to the vote if one drops out for whatever reason. At that point, you could see a situation in which Rishi Sunak becomes Prime Minister. If there is an intention to do a more rapid vote within the membership, then yes, I think there is probably little chance of that happening.
Very important point that you raised, that at the end of the day, Liz Truss quitting does not solve the essential problem. She's just left it for someone else to fix. The fact that you need to cushion the people of the UK against very high energy prices, and on the other hand, you have to justify how you're going to fund them. That essential problem remains. Perhaps it's now for someone else to take up. What are the kind of steps that we need to be now quickly seeing to bring some stability? Alistair, that question's for you.
Sorry, what's that? Okay. Well, I think first of all, we need to see Jeremy Hunt staying in the Treasury, and we need to see what he unveils in his package on the 31st of October. His job was made much, much more difficult yesterday by Liz Truss's insistence that the triple lock on pensions would remain in place. Personally, although it's not a great vote winner, and perhaps particularly not for the Conservative Party, I would like to see the new Prime Minister and the new Chancellor, or preferably Jeremy Hunt, still in the Treasury. I would like to see them unlock the triple lock on pensions, because I think that would give the Chancellor, the Treasury, a good deal more manoeuvrability to get that fiscal hole filled. Clearly, that does need to be the government's top priority, and I struggle to see how they can do it with the triple lock in place without swinging cuts in other departments, so-called efficiency savings, which is an interesting euphemism even at the best of times, which this clearly isn't, which would actually have a negative impact on the UK's long-term growth. Cuts in education. I doubt we'd see cuts in absolute terms in the NHS, but we could see cuts in real terms. Cuts in infrastructure expenditure and so on. That's not in the UK's best long-term interests as far as growth prospects are concerned. And I just want to throw in one more random thought, not about this question, before you hand on to the next speaker, and that is, is anybody ruling out Boris Johnson having a run, bearing in mind his allusion during his departure speech from number 10 that he might well be back? I personally would not rule out Boris Johnson looking to see if there's an opportunity here.
You know, at this point, we are in that territory where literally anything can happen. And this is usually a speciality of Indian politics, but clearly it's not restricted to our politics. Anything, it seems, is possible. No one thought Liz Truss would be Prime Minister for just 45 days. And what a tumultuous 45 days it has been. Will her resignation start to do or undo some of the damage been brought in by some of those announcements is truly the big question. We'll have to wrap this special coverage here, but I want to thank all of you for joining us as we track this story very, very closely.